Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I don't know why I just felt I could do like a robot voice there. Anyway, my name is Clark, and with me is Cullen. How you doing, Cullen?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm like pumped. Can you feel the energy?
You're sounding a bit robotic there for this.
Well, it's like all this time on Zoom, right? I've just been, spending so much time in front of computers. I'm turning into one. Anyway, welcome everybody for episode 33, where we are going to be discussing Cullen's favorite film of all time. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there. I think you said this was your favorite film, if you had to boil it down to one. Butch, Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah, it's actually funny because this has been since I was 7 years old when I first saw it. That long.
That is amazing. It's awesome. It's always, and like we've hit on this numerous times, but it's hysterical to me that you and I are 20 years apart. But a testament, obviously, to your fantastic parents or whoever it was in your life that introduced you to all of these amazing films, and that you didn't grow up on like Power Rangers or whatever the hell else was on TV when you were like, I don't even know what was on TV.
I do find that funny because there's always like people that are my age that will reference movies that came out on like more particularly TV movies that came out around the time that I was young. And like I haven't seen any of them. Like I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So it's like so you were raised with some good taste, which is awesome. But so Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which of course I'm sure most of you are familiar with, but 1969 Western directed by George Roy Hill. I always have to slow that down because I don't know why it's the Roy throws me off in the middle of his name. Yeah. William Goldman, of course, wrote it. And Mr. Paul Newman, who is one of my favorite actors.
I was going to say that too.
Yeah. And maybe the most handsome man to have ever lived.
Yes.
And Robert Redford, which it's like, wow, yeah. When you can, when Robert Redford is like, second fiddle.
This launched his career too. This was kind of his first big,
It did. That's right.
I've got well, of course, my Sundance mustache on right now.
You've got your Sundance, well, of course, Sundance Film Festival, and obviously this had a big impact on both these actors. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think Paul Newman, didn't he name his one of his nonprofit foundations, the like Hole in the Wall gang or something?
Yeah. There was something along those lines. Yeah.
I think it was his series of camps. I think that he started for underprivileged children, and I think it might have been tied in with his Newman's Own. They donate all of profits from the Newman's Own line of salad dressings and other things. I mean, clearly,
which is a little bit ironic too. Little fun fact that the real Butch Cassidy gang was actually called the Wild Bunch, and they just operated out of Hole in the Wall, Wyoming.
Right.
So they weren't actually called the Hole in the Wall gang. They were actually called the Wild Bunch, which is of course another famous late '60s Western by Peckinpah.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think that this production was aware of the other production, Peckinpah's film, and I think there was some concern. They were afraid that they were going to be named the same, or they might. There was some concern there. So yeah, definitely. But so clearly a big film for these two actors. Now, of course, Paul Newman had been a star for years before this film, and like you said, Robert Redford became a star in part because of this film. But in '69, I mean, it was the top grossing film released that year, over
100 million,
which was huge for back then.
Yeah, only on a $6 million budget too. So.
I know. I mean, it's insane to me, first of all, that you look and you see what $6 million could buy back then. Now, clearly, of course, inflation. I don't know, $6 million. I'm going to take a wild guess. Maybe that's 30 million today. Back in '69 numbers, I'm not sure, but still. Amazing that you could do so much with that amount of money back then, and actually was critically successful. Now there were some kind of split reviews, but the Academy loved the film. How many? I think
it was very like culturally. I think most audiences
have
really great
impact.
Audience reviews.
I
mean, it's pretty obvious why this is also my favorite movie as well, because it's got my favorite one of my favorite writers, William Goldman.
Uh-huh.
My favorite actor, Paul Newman. My favorite cinematographer, Conrad L. Hall.
Wow.
Or Connie Hall. So
it's just hitting all the boxes for you, man.
Yep, and it's a Western. I always
and it's a
Western.
You gotta love. So let's jump right into that, because one of my favorite things. I love hearing about people's stories and how they find a film, and all of us, right? There's not just the film itself, but it's like, how does a film meet us in our life? What's the set and setting, the time and place, has such a huge impact on what films really speak to us and what films don't, and maybe those things change over time. So tell us a little bit about your story with this film, and how it kind of came to hold this premier spot in your mind.
I think a big part of it was, I was 7 when I first saw it, and my dad showed it to me, and I think like just upon viewing it, I think I was really just kind of like enthralled by the lightness of it and the humor in it, and how I think contemporary to me it felt then. And that it was, again, being 7 years old, you can't really contextualize these things. Like, it's not like I was sitting there doing an analysis of the movie,
right.
but there was like a big element to it of just, it felt like, two friends like having fun. And it really, even so, like, as a kid, I went out to the Rocky Mountains a lot and hiked and climbed and would play in the woods with friends. And there's like a lot of moments in this movie that really just feel like it's Butch and Sundance, like running up and down a mountain and just running through some woods and it just kind of it feels so like on a very.
So which one were you when you were a kid? Which one were
Butch.
you?
I was always Butch.
You were always Butch. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But I there was always this element to it that just felt very, very real and sort of almost accessible from like a level of like playtime. Like, and I always liked Star Wars as a kid too, but of course it's more difficult to pretend you're on Hoth and have like AT-ATs coming at you than it is to be Butch and Sundance running through a forest. And so there was a huge element of it that sparked like my imagination. I think as I grew up too, and I always liked Westerns. Like, even before I'd seen this, I was always really into the Leone Westerns.
And you and your dad watched a lot of Westerns together, right? Yeah. So same with me. Yeah.
So there was a huge like love of that, and this one I think was also a big thing of it was it felt so different. Like, it really doesn't feel like a typical Western. You don't have the Ennio Morricone score. You don't have there's zooms in this movie, but there aren't a ton of those like typical spaghetti Western crash zooms.
Right.
It's not as, I would say, pessimistic as a lot of those movies are either. It's I mean, not that it's necessarily, as it's not a happy ending,
very
but
different.
It's not necessarily like the movie's not grim for the grand majority of it.
Right.
And so I think that was a huge part of it. And I remember, like, even again as I got older, and I remember when Red Dead Redemption, the first game, came out, that this movie impacted me so much that there was a point when I remember playing the online add-on of that game. It was like just the multiplayer, which was just the whole map. It was just a free roam. There wasn't much to do, but you basically just went online and could play with other people, and there was like little missions you could do. And I remember at one point this player was just chasing me across the map, like super far away. I never saw him, but I could like watch his little dot on the map just following my trail. And we went all over, and I never saw him, but like there would be a point where I'd be standing in a meadow or something and shots would ring out from the distance. And it felt like, I just remember this movie just had such an impact. I was like, this is like Butch and Sundance. I'm being chased across by this distant, malevolent force that's coming after me. So throughout my entire childhood, and again up into my career, I made a Western a few, I guess 2 or 3 years ago now, that was directly inspired by this movie. Every single facet of that movie was pulled from Butch, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I did kind of an extensive research on the cinematography, and so there's a huge amount of influence that this movie's had on me, and even like beyond its genre. A ton of the things that I've written have, if not directly grabbed things from this film, have very much been inspired by just the tone, the way that the characters interact, the banter between Butch and Sundance, the camera work. I pull so much from just like the way that the camera moves and reveals information in this movie, that even again in contemporary settings, in the feature that I'm doing this summer, there are certainly shots in there that are directly linked to Butch and Sundance.
So like, I just want to make sure I'm understanding then, because just in case it's not clear. So you kind of like this film just a little bit.
It's okay. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome.
You know, I like Butch Cassidy, but I prefer the sequel, The Sundance Kid, and I think it's funny that they're always packaged together as kind of a duo movie. So,
but that's all. That's so cool.
My joke of the day.
And when, so did you watch this like on TV? Was it like a
no? I think I actually remember exactly the. So my dad came home with a like triple set of movies. It was this.
On VHS, right?
Yeah. I think it was on. Yeah, I think I have the Blu-ray now, but I think the original set we had was VHS. So it was this. Yeah. It was A Bridge Too Far, and it was The Dirty Dozen.
Or was it DVD? Because you're young enough that I guess. Well, how old?
Well, when I was 7, it was when I was 7 would have been. I guess what I would have been. 2005.
So that definitely could have been DVD.
Yeah, it could have been. It was. I think I can't remember if it was bought or if it was just a pack that we already had. But yeah, so it was a combination. It was like a 3-pack of just movies that were saran wrapped together, basically. This, Bridge Too Far, and then The Dirty Dozen, which I also love those two movies as well. But this one
your dad's got good taste.
Really stuck out to me. Yeah, this one was very much the kind of the big one for me.
I love how that, like, to me, that's so fascinating. And you know, we have not yet covered a film. I mean, Mad Max and Road Warrior are very close to as far as my relationship to them, you know, being similar to your relationship to this film. But I don't think we've hit on exactly yet the film that would be the parallel for me as this is to you.
Yes.
And it'll be fun when we do that. But it really is. I'm always mesmerized by and just really interested in how that works. Like how, you know, what this magic, I feel like it's such a magical thing that takes place between the film and all of the work that's gone into this film and the vision of the director and the, you know, the performances and the cinematography and the writing. I mean, it takes hundreds, if not thousands of people nowadays to put together a film. And it's such a crapshoot as to whether that's going to speak to you or not.
You're throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. You're just throwing it at the, and it's so. I mean, that's the thing. That's the dream. I mean, that anybody who's ever worked on a film, anybody who's ever been a part of some kind of creative endeavor. I mean, you are describing what the highest possible dream, the best possible outcome could ever be of like. But I think it's so funny too, because there's a lot of choices in this movie, which we'll get into later, that aren't typical. Like that were probably very risky choices.
Very risky,
even just down to casting. Like I think the original cast or the original choice for Sundance was Steve McQueen. And Steve McQueen and Paul Newman didn't get along and couldn't agree on
Redford
who would get
was
top
mostly
billing.
unknown. Mostly,
yeah, exactly.
Unknown
and Newman knew Redford and basically said, this guy's really good. I promise you he'll be good. And that he basically put his own name on the line to get Redford in it. And I think it's also funny because, again, as a really young kid, I remember, you know, I was in like a ski club as a kid, like a ski, you know, learning competition. I remember that there was this guy.
Wait, it wasn't hockey?
I did do hockey as well.
Okay, because I was going to say, whoa. I was like, wait a minute, dude.
Yeah, I'm going to be kicked out of the country. But I remember this older guy, probably in his like 60s, when we were talking about movies one day. We were on the bus going to one of the ski hills, and asked me like what my favorite movie was, because I think it was just something that came up. I was probably 9 at the time. Yeah, and I said this, and he was like, you're like 9 years old, and this
totally
is
surprised.
It was really and again, it's one of those things that every time I watch this movie, I probably watch it once every few years, maybe once every 2 or so years, and every time I do, I always it's like, am I gonna see more flaws in it this time? Is it gonna kind of like not,
and it's held up,
wear down? But no, it's always held up. It doesn't. I think a big part of that is that it's not, again, super simple story, not super long, it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like right when things kind of get normal in this context of story, right when you kind of get into the norm of things switch. And I think that that's a really big part of the movie, is that like you've got this, you know, the movie opens of course on the dynamic of the gang and that they're robbing this train, and the first train robbery of course is successful, and then the second is not. And so it's like right when you get this dynamic of, okay, here's how the gang operates, we switch it up, now they're on the run. And then right when you get kind of used to them being on the run, okay, now they're in Bolivia, and they're doing that. And then right when they get to Bolivia and things,
now there's a montage, now there's like a music video, now
so I think that it's just the way that the story keeps moving forward, I think is really a testament to like Goldman's script and how how good it is. And of course, Goldman went on to write some
fantastic
really amazing
writer.
movies,
Exceptional. Yeah,
but it just, to me, again, and it just, for a brief comparison, I think one of the things that I find with a lot of movies from this era is that there's always points that there's like dips. And so I was watching, for example, a few of the Pink Panther movies, the Peter Sellers Pink Panther movies the other day, directed by Blake Edwards. And as good as those are, and as much as I like remember watching them as a kid and thinking that they're really funny, there's always moments in those movies where you're just kind of
cringe.
All right, let's move it on. It's kind of slopping, and this movie has none of those for me. Like this it moves forward. It doesn't take its time or too much time on anything, and not even to mention, again, which we'll get into, the beautiful imagery and cinematography done by Conrad L. Hall, and so yeah, I think that's a big part of why.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's a 5 out of 10.
Well, that's like I said, that's the dream. Anybody who ever makes anything, this is what you hope for, to have this, even with one person. That's fantastic. I mean, for me, I'm like, to follow your, story on how you came to this film. Mine is nowhere near that. I honestly can't even remember how old I was when I first saw the film, but I was not young. Although I also very much like Westerns, and I grew up watching Westerns with my father as well. It was kind of a bonding thing for me. I was much more kind of focused on spaghetti Westerns. I don't ever recall actually having seen this film with my father or, as a young kid. And honestly, it probably wasn't until I was in my 20s that I saw this film on my own as I was going through, probably something like I was going through Paul Newman's, filmography. And so this was one I hadn't seen. And so, I rented it, or something. That's probably the case. But I did not have the same extent of, the same type of reaction that you did to it. So this will be interesting to kind of compare and contrast. And I may, have some different opinions or different thoughts about how I was impacted on some things, but so that'll be interesting. But yeah, for me, it did not hold the same, it didn't captivate me as much. A lot of things stood out to me as being fascinating, interesting, some things confusing, some things a little, that's an interesting choice. But, definitely a movie I enjoyed watching, definitely a movie that, that I'm happy that I saw, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. So watching it now in preparation for this was the first time I'd seen it in quite a while, and I definitely enjoyed watching it. So, but yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit then since we've kind of covered our personal, how we kind of came to the films personally. Let's talk a little bit about the context. Let's try to put this film into the context of, what was happening in 1969 in cinema, and especially American cinema. And I think the fact that it's a Western has some importance. And
well, I think that's a really interesting point that you made too, about that you were into Westerns and that, but you just don't really recall seeing this one, because I wouldn't really say that this is ever like grouped in with other Westerns.
Agreed.
That it's because it doesn't, other than the fact that it takes place in the West, it doesn't there's not really much that feels like a Western. There's not really, there's of course like there's the gunfight at the end, but there's no, I think that's really, apart from like 3 other instances of guns being fired, there's no showdowns, there's no duel at dawn, there's no,
I mean, it's definitely not a John Wayne or like John Ford, or even, it's not
about like the frontier in that way.
It's not like this, and that's important to know too. I think that Westerns were historically the most popular and successful genre of film in America for the longest time.
Yes.
Now, by the time we get to 1969, that's no longer becoming the case. You have, the 50s turn into the 60s, and we have a significant cultural changes going on in the country, and that's mirrored in the popularity of what types of films. So this film is at an interesting crossroad where, like you said, it's not really a Western, but yet it definitely, like on face value, kind of looks like a Western. You have horses, you have the Western landscape, you have some shootouts, but in tone, in story, in execution, in music, you have something that does not look like a Western at all. So And I wonder if that might have confused or kind of agitated some critics at the time, because if you go back and you look at
Ebert especially,
right? If you look at some critics really enjoyed it, of course, but a lot of people were split, and other people were like, I don't get what was this? What's raindrops keep falling on my head doing in this movie?
Yeah.
What?
And I think that's the thing, is that it very much, to me, in more ways than one, is aware of the fact that the Western is going out of fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to me, that's what the movie's about. That it's about the fall of the Wild West. It's about civilization encroaching on these gangs, and which I think, again, is the reason why something like Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2, which is about the fall of the Wild West and about civilization, so like liberally takes from this movie, is because to me, again, it's almost like a metaphor for the Western genre, that you've got that scene when they're talking to the sheriff that they kind of are friendly with, and he says, "You guys are done. Your age is over. You're dead. You're gonna die, and it's gonna be bloody, and the only thing you can do is choose where," which of course is true. But I think, to me, that almost is like the filmmakers saying that about the Western genre, that it's and one of the things that I always like about exploring Westerns when I teach a class and do a lesson on Westerns is that, again, at the beginning of cinema, the advent of cinema, Westerns were contemporary. Westerns were not period pieces. They were actually, the Great Train Robbery, that 15-minute silent film, was occurring at the time. If you went out west, if you went out to Utah, California, Oregon, that was what was going on. And so I think it's really neat that it's a genre that grew up with cinema, and that went from being a contemporary piece of kind of adventure from, the frontier, to now it's a period piece. And so you get to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and you kind of realize that, the conventions that we're used to in Westerns are, whether it's John Ford's Westerns with John Wayne and the big vistas and the frontier and the idea of this positive push of civilization out, where now it's about like the second wave of civilization, and that usually means law and order.
Right.
And so you're losing the element of
rules,
structure, just civilization,
bureaucracy.
You're getting rules, structure, on a much larger scale, like just capitalist enterprise is coming out. So, and that's a big part of this, is that it's not the law that goes after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's a posse formed by a businessman who they keep robbing. Yeah,
and which is an interesting point too. And not to get like necessarily too far off on this, but it's not that crime goes away. It's that the type of criminal that's allowed to exist changes. It changes. It changes from a personal, criminal, like the small gangs or individuals who are robbing banks or trains, to incorporated criminals. People who now own land, own large companies, have lots of resources, and they're able to kind of wrap up their criminal enterprises, or things that are kind of on the line of criminal or not criminal. Like putting the law into your own hands and hiring a posse of people to go kill somebody who's robbed you. It was probably not necessarily straight legal, but it's like the incorporation. It's the like enveloping of crime into a bureaucracy that I think kind of is part of this that takes place. But and I think that it's and they did such a great job in this film of keeping that posse. For half the film, basically the main characters are being chased by this posse by keeping them nameless and faceless, and keeping them kind of they're almost it's almost like these films,
representative almost,
like the Terminator or so many other films where it's an inevitability that is chasing you. And that's, of course, exactly what's happening in this film. It's the inevitability.
That's why I love it, because it to me is the movie at a whole is about the death of the Wild West.
Yeah.
And I think, which is really interesting, because to me the Wild Bunch is very similar, but it just takes a different approach to that. The Wild Bunch to me is a movie that's about the death of the Wild West due to violence and
and hopefully it'll be fun to do that one in a later episode. Because there's a lot to compare and contrast there. And since Westerns we both love Westerns, maybe we'll do a few more Westerns here over the course of our episodes. So context too. We have Easy Rider was released the same year. We've got New Hollywood, and we've talked a little bit about New Hollywood. New Hollywood is coming into its own, and that's changing things up a lot. And so this is interesting. This film does kind of sit in it. And I think even, you have Paul Newman, who was a star of the earlier Hollywood system, who is, this traditionally, attractive, handsome man. He's already established. You have Redford coming in, who's not so established, who's kind of this younger, kind of sidekick. It's interesting that the film straddles a unique time in American cinema.
Yeah, and again, even down to, so like we talk about the new Hollywood movement, the big cinematographers in that age were Conrad Hall, Gordon Willis, Vittorio Storaro, Laszlo Kovacs, who did Easy Rider, or Easy Rider,
right?
And so I think it's really interesting again that you're getting out of this very formal. The Western genre, which was typically seen as sort of more the formal, again, John Ford, very workman directors and things like that.
Very much, yeah.
Is now suddenly, shot on this really dirtied up film stock by Conrad Hall.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. I mean, this is a huge part of this film. I mean, it's obviously... Conrad Hall is considered widely to be one of the best, greatest cinematographers to ever, to ever light a scene, to ever work in film. And I think it's like, I don't know, how many Academy Awards has he won? I think 3, I'm not mistaken.
3. He won for this. He won for, I think, American Beauty.
Yes, American Beauty. And
I can't remember his third one.
I can't remember
was
either.
Was it In Cold Blood?
Road to Perdition.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay.
In 2002.
Sam Mendes. Yeah.
And nominated something like...
Which is an amazing looking movie. That movie is, even that movie, the fact that movie came out in 2002 and looks... Yeah. Not that things were bad in 2002, but just it looks... It's a league above anything else that really came out around that time.
Yeah. Nominated for 10, but yeah. So let's talk about it, because it's one of the it's so immediately obvious. I mean, it's even if you are not a kind of a film nut or a connoisseur, I mean, the cinematography really does have a personality. Mm-hmm. Everything from film stock to exposure to the use lens usage, zooms. I mean,
really new Panavision zooms. It was like 50 to 500 millimeters.
Yeah, right. The way that he composes and recomposes shots, with movement and with zoom.
And he famously liked to only shoot on longer lenses. I think, as I said, like there was a 50 was kind of his minimum, and because of that, the camera's always further away from the action than you might typically expect.
Right.
It's not up in the face of it. It's
so
very,
and this is something, I know that you had spent a lot I time studying this, so this will be kind of interesting, because we'll be able to get into a little bit of this nitty gritty of this, maybe more than usual. So I don't know, when I was watching, now we have to speak a little bit too. I think, the only transfer that I'm aware of is an old Blu-ray transfer that I think you said 2007 or 2008. I don't know if the digital version that might be available on iTunes or somewhere else is the same or different. I can't
because there's a 4K version, but I don't know if it's just an upscale.
There's no physical media, at least in the United States, for a 4K version.
Yeah, it's only online. Yeah,
the transfer was tough. The transfer I had was clearly not a lot of love was put into this, which is a shame. This film is definitely deserving of it, but it's dirty. There's damage on the negative. You can see there's color banding and clipping. It's a notoriously not great transfer.
It's really, that shows how important it is to do good transfers, because one of the things that this movie is really noted for, and that Conrad L. Hall did intentionally, was really overexpose.
Right.
And film famously handles overexposed highlights beautifully. In fact, I would say that overexposed film has a really, really beautiful, gorgeous look to it that digital doesn't, simply because digital has, a much lower highlight ceiling, at least earlier digital technology. It's getting there now, but film always just handles highlights really, really beautifully, especially overexposed highlights. So you're going from moments where the sky is overexposed, and you can basically, all you can do is imagine how good it would look on a 35 millimeter print.
Yeah.
But because it was, this 2007 transfer, sort of before really great scanning material, it's like you can see highlight clipping and things like that. And of course, that's nothing against the movie, because it's not like Conrad Hall was dead by then, and so it's not like he could have overseen it or anything. But I just think it's a shame. I think it's like, a movie like this that again has a lot of cultural relevance.
Certainly deserves a greater. We could I could go on and on about the travesty.
Maybe we'll be the change for that.
Right,
this podcast
Hey,
will.
I don't know who, I forget who owns it, but whoever owns this
Fox.
film.
Well, Disney now.
Disney now,
Disney
please. So it's actually unlikely. Then I highly doubt that they will ever see a physical release. Sadly, but perhaps it can be
sad.
rescanned and remastered for 4K delivery online at least. But so let's get back to that. Yeah, I mean, so some interesting choices that he makes. Right. So we're talking. I mean, as far as I can understand, overexposed most of the outdoor stuff by 2, even 3 stops.
Yeah.
And you get this. I mean, I almost feel, in trying to imagine in my mind what this would look like without the limitations of the Blu-ray. But I mean, I feel like a heat, like I really get a sense of kind of. I mean, the landscape seems to almost be even more oppressive because it takes some of the color out of the sky, right? And it gives it this like. I don't know, is it? But it feels hotter.
Yeah,
to me.
I mean, I think the thing is too when it's like you look at the sweat on people's faces glares more.
Yeah,
and so when they're dirty, when they've got dust on them, it's so much more apparent that they've got like dust and grime on their face, and just even they put filters, they put some people call them locons, but basically glare filters on pretty much all the outdoor shots. The sky is super, super washed out as well.
Yes.
It's really, of course, again, when you overexpose film, it loses saturation. Yeah. So it's really, not super saturated, but very glowy, a lot of like glows in the highlights and very soft. Especially because those early anamorphics as well were really the very soft zooms that you get this. It's not like a beautiful glow. And I would say the only moments in this movie that are really shot that look, intentionally beautified are the raindrops keep falling on your head.
Yeah, like a very romanticized.
Scene, again, very much looks like a almost more music video-y than, not in a negative way. I like that. I know that's a hot topic.
And
scene
you really
for a lot of people,
get a golden sun in that. There's a warmth to the light in that moment that you actually don't see anywhere throughout. I mean, the sun is hot. In my mind,
it feels like sweaty. This movie,
yeah,
almost. Like it's weird.
And you're right.
Feels,
the raindrop scene is the only time that you have this warmth.
It feels breezy, sort of more. Yeah, but whereas the rest of this, like I think it's an interesting movie because it's, again, this is such a specific thing, but like you feel almost how hot the actors must be in their costumes. And how
that's what I'm saying,
and stuff like that, and
and especially through the chase scenes where you're scrambling over rocks, and you've got this gritty realism to the landscape, and the sun. I mean, even the sun is chased, right? It's like against them. It's you've got the oppression of the landscape. It feels like it's not welcoming. Now it's beautiful, but it's not welcoming. Let's talk too this, because this is something that you're going to notice immediately in this film, is the very, very, very wide usage of zooms.
Yes, and not crashes, not like the typical
only
spaghetti
a couple,
western.
Only in a couple moments, but we've got a lot of slow, a lot of recompose, of slow zooms. We have a lot of recomposition with zooms, so we have scene is framed, moves to another framing as the scene moves. As opposed to cutting, which is what we'd often do today. You'd often have a cut, the setup, but you really don't have that. I was actually surprised at the usage of zooms, and zooms were not. I think what the Ingenue came out in like '63, I think.
Yeah, the first big one. Yeah,
and that kind of began the usage of zooms in film. It didn't even really hardly happen much before then. This, I think, was a Panavision 50 to 500.
Yeah, and especially, because anamorphic zooms especially were such a hard thing to nail. They were
very
such a
hard
difficult,
to work with,
like engineering wise too.
Yeah.
Like that, it was so difficult to get that to work because of all the moving parts, and that if you move the anamorphic element, focus, then it'll stretch differently. So, so you can definitely tell that there's drawbacks to using. They're not super fast either. You don't really get the super shallow depth of field, which is something that Conrad Hall loves, that he likes really shallow depth of fields. And he says, he says that he doesn't like everything to be in focus, and that he likes to pinpoint moments. And very, just the way that the zooms work. I'm a huge fan of it again. It was something that I really used for the Western that I did, which is just this idea that you're not necessarily like pushing it on the audience that this is what's important, but you're rather letting there's a really fundamental difference, I think, between crash zooming in on something and slow zooming in on something. Even
and
if
a big difference between
the same.
What a modern film would, of course, you'd be dollying, you'd be using jibs, cranes, and it's a very different feeling. I can imagine that this helped their setups. The speed at which they could shoot must have been, I mean, increased.
As someone who basically crabbed that entirely from the production, very good, but also looks great. That you set the tripod down.
Yeah.
It's not on a dolly. You don't move it. All you do is pan.
Yeah.
You just follow the action by, and it's so simple, but I think that it's something that so many people overlook. Well, that they really, because they want this dynamic camera to go in and out of the action or
zooms have almost been lost in the grammar of film today. I mean, that it's, and I can't tell you how many people I talk to, fellow filmmakers, people I respect, but I mean, I think it's changing maybe a tiny little bit, but it was like, how dare you put a zoom on a cinema camera like that? I mean, that was just no. I shoot primes, and I can't. If anybody shoots zooms, like, oh my gosh, this is a travesty.
Which is, I'm a huge proponent of zooms.
I love zooms, and my love for zooms started more in documentary, and not so much changing focal length during a shot,
mid-shot,
but having that flexibility and that immediacy to reframe instantly, to have that flexibility. Zooms have gotten so good. I mean, you can find very fast zooms, very sharp zooms. In today's day and age,
prices are coming down too. Yeah,
prices are coming down. But I was just going to say, I'm a fan, and I'm a fan, and I actually love seeing zooms from time to time in film, and used as part of the grammar of film. And I don't know that I've ever seen a film that used zooms grammatically the way this film, to the extent to which this film uses it. So I highly recommend people, if you're interested in seeing the zoom used in a way that most films just would never, ever approach a zoom, check this film out.
Yeah, watch it even the first, I think what's so interesting too is that you get, so the movie, of course, the opening credits of the film are, it's silent. It's a silent film. It's almost like a silent short film that was actually directed by, I think, the second unit director.
That's correct.
Who was a real silent filmmaker, which I think is really cool that they kind of got back into his game. And so it doesn't start, like, it's like almost like a little parody thing of Butch and Sundance, and it doesn't star Robert Redford or Newman. I think it's almost supposed to be faking as like archival footage.
I think so.
And then you pull out of that, so it's all in sepia. Pull out of that, and then we're in the movie. It's widescreen, but we're still in sepia, or however it's pronounced.
I know what you're saying.
But the first shot is this zoom in on a window of a reflection. And then I think that what they must have done is used a polarizing filter to then shift the reflection to Paul Newman staring through the window.
Right.
And again, all in one shot. Then he walks out of that door, zoom out to show this town, then zoom back in as he walks over the bank. And we
have like three setups in one shot.
Yeah. And it's the only Western I think I've ever seen where our main character, who's a bank robber in the first scene, walks into a bank and doesn't rob it, which I think is great. Like,
also, can I just say that that whole first setup with basically the entire story being told with inserts is fantastic.
Yes,
as such an excellent efficiency of visual storytelling. I love it.
And one of my favorite lines in a movie ever, which is when he says to the bank guard, what happened to the old bank? It was beautiful. And he says, people kept robbing it. Small price to pay for booty.
and there you go. I think this speaks to, I think you tie this in with the statement that you mentioned previously about, hey, it's your time has come. Yeah. And I think you put these two lines together in the film, and you kind of have, I think, the theme of the film, or what they're trying to kind of say, that we lose something with civilization, that you lose something with rules and an abundance of bureaucracy, and one of the things that you lose is a personality, and you lose a creativity and a freedom. And it's the age-old kind of equation of what you gain and what you lose from civilization. But
and what's interesting too is that first scene sort of goes by of Butch just kind of like looking at the bank, kind of nonchalantly, like doesn't draw much attention to itself. It's just kind of the opening. Nothing really major happens. But I think what's interesting about that scene is when you go back and rewatch the movie, is you realize that that's kind of, it is again, speaking to the entire theme of the movie of the West being done, the West dying, that in a normal Western, the opening scene, even in the Wild Bunch, would be our main characters who are bank robbers entering a bank and robbing
it up.
And maybe something goes wrong, but that would be the opening scene. But this movie immediately tells you that it's not that, because he goes into the bank and it's too secure for him. They shut all the things. They shut the bank vault. Is like this big vault door now. And so the first thing our main character realizes is, oh crap, here comes
the world's closing in on you. Yeah, exactly. The world is changing. Yeah,
it's really interesting how such a simple opening moment can, and how efficient it is too, that you get that piece of information and then we immediately go over to Sundance, who, again, we get this great bit about that you kind of see how stubborn Sundance is, and that, but also how they both have a little bit of a sense of humor to them, because it's this whole like, why don't you ask us to stay? And so. Well, and I think it's a really brilliant opening, and that it's and the fact that it's done in sepia too is I think, to me, really,
and of course the film is bookended. Well, actually, not even just bookended, because you have the montage, which kind of reproduces these old sepia photographs by kind of telling a piece of the story during in New York. And before they go to South America, and then of course we bookend it with the freeze frame. Basically fading into a sepia tone.
And a big zoom out there,
And so it kind of I think it's cute in the way they kind of present this as being a mostly factual story, and of course in a very, very, very general broad sense, yes, these people existed, and some of these things are generically historically true, but I like how they kind of present it as that it's like, we're pulling this story out of history and we're kind of showing it to you close up, and then we're putting it back on the shelves of history, and kind of so it's that's kind of the sense that I get, this like going from sepia to color and then back to sepia. It's like we're pulling the story off the shelf, this old story, and we're kind of pulling it up to our face close and observing it, and then we're kind of, okay, we'll put it back
for next time. And I think real quick, I actually just a little tidbit on the cinematography. That's I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that ending shot when it freeze frames and it pulls out and it shows the entire square? I always have thought, and I still think, that is two shots composited. I think.
Well, I think it has to be.
Because I don't think there's any way you would get that detail
not on 35
on such a close up of and then pull out and be able to. Yeah, so I think it's got to be a composite. That was all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody if you know for certain, but that would be my guess, because I don't even know if that were shot on 70. I don't know if there would be enough resolution, maybe, but I doubt it, because you pull so far out. I mean, it's an extraordinary reveal there. I mean, you are so tight in on the two of them, and it's frozen, so you've got a lot of time to criticize the image if and because we hold on it for a very long time, and then we pull out to see the entire square, the entire arena where this battle has taken place.
Not a typical or a difficult effect to pull off, but
they pulled it off very well.
It's seamless, because I think what they would have probably done, because they're kind of in an archway, I think they likely would have just cut out the archway. But but just a kind of little quick aside, because I was curious to know, it's such a famous final shot. So I think let's maybe talk about a little bit about music.
Let's talk about some music, because I think the music is a big part of what makes this film unique, and what makes this film something quite a bit different than just your average Western, especially of this era. And it's one of the areas that I'm kind of torn on personally, but let's talk about it. I mean, on the one end, we have Burt Bacharach's score. I don't even know score. I would call it almost like songs, because I don't even. Right?
It's a soundtrack more so than a
soundtrack.
Score.
It's not a score, and so I think that's a big difference.
Because there's no music. That's a big point. Is that there's no music anywhere in the film except for the opening and closing credits and the montages. Nothing else in the movie.
Very, very, very different than, let's say, a spaghetti western of that same era, The Good and the Bad, the Ugly. I mean, these just gigantic in scope scores.
Yes, like Ecstasy of Gold, and
right. And so it's such a difference from that, and it's it's definitely not of the era. It's anachronistic. What is it? Come on, help me. Anachronistic.
Anachronistic. Yes. There you go. I almost said anarcho Like,
that's okay.
So it's anarchy.
If anybody's like, if anybody's with us this many episodes in, then they'll forgive us for that. We're trying our best.
I hope so.
But basically, what I mean to say by that is that it's music that is so clearly not of this era, right? It's nowhere near the era that this is taking place in. So you've got, I mean, and the biggest example of this is the Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that for a second, because I mean, this is huge. The film literally stops, and has a music video in it.
Yeah.
Of this playful bike ride that it just comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting this at all. I mean, look, I knew about it, of course. It's famous now, but I mean, if you were watching this film at the theater for the first time ever in 1969, I'm going to imagine this is going to hit you over the head.
Yeah. Which I think what's funny about that, I always understand when people are like, I don't love that bit,
right.
or that even the score that they've, when people aren't huge, I love it. Like, I love the, every single part of it. I actually have the score on my phone.
That's awesome.
I think it's great. But I think the reason that I think it's great is almost because of how like silly it is, and that,
playful.
I know Sam
it's
Raimi
very playful.
in Spider-Man 2 pulled from it, because there's the big montage to Raindrops in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
And it's very similar, where it just kind of pauses for this happy montage. But I don't know, it's something about it to me. Like, I always think about it in a context of like, if the movie didn't have that scene, what would it feel like? And I almost think that the movie sort of needs that scene, because we almost need this final, it's almost the right before things go wrong, that this happy, and of course you can do that in different ways. It doesn't have to be. I mean, there's ways to show happiness, but I think in this
musical
movie
interlude
has a very heightened sense of style, and I think that in a very interesting way, that it's that I think anything else wouldn't really work. Like, I think, like you said,
it would be a different movie. I mean, there's no question it would be a different movie if this weren't in it.
In the way that you said, sort of that described it as like the sepia at the beginning and the end sort of seemed like you're taking this movie off the shelf and dusting it off and looking at this old kind of tableau of this is a story of the Wild West. And I think that to me that's why it works, is because it's a tale. It's like a tale of Butch and Sundance, and it's
like a mythology.
It's
like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it's like a saloon tale of like, and you would have some piano player do, and it very much goes along with this like silent movie kind of thing, where it's just I think that it works for me because of that it's because of the heightened sense. If the movie was different, like if this was a if this were Fistful of Dollars, and then suddenly Clint Eastwood is riding on a bike, it would make sense. But
I mean, there's no question that I appreciate the choice. It's not a choice as a filmmaker that I would likely make for my own film, but that's great. I mean, it does feel a little odd, and it kind of catches me off balance, but I so appreciate films that take risks like this and do interesting things that, I mean, look, I'm always for it when I see it in a film. I mean, even if the choice seems a little odd to you, I'm glad somebody made a strong choice,
Yeah.
I mean, in the day and age of like, gosh, not to like take us way off the tracks here, but geez, just to see what in the world is going on in the world of modern film. I watched some of the HBO Max Snyder cut of whatever.
Justice League.
And I was just like, I mean, look, I'll take a choice like this any day over these film, this kind of this modern kind of film. I mean,
and I think it's funny too, because it's so the version of the song that's used in the movie is you can get it, but it's different than the typical Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. So it's slightly altered. Like there's the big kind of almost circus sounding interlude when he's doing the tricks on the bicycle.
Yeah.
And again, it's like moments like that kind of to me highlight how
which by the way, I was impressed. I was impressed. Did you know that Paul Newman did all... I mean, it's clear. Yeah. You can clearly see it's him. But Paul Newman did all those bike stunts except for the last one where he falls into the fence. Yeah. Probably there were some like insurance issues or something there. They didn't want him to get hurt. But
I think it's very... it feels to me like this is Butch's and Sundance's life. Yeah. That it is happy, carefree, riding on a bicycle, with my friend's girlfriend.
I know, which we're going to get to in a minute. Yeah, we're going to talk about that interesting kind of trifecta of a relationship there. But yeah, I mean, songs versus score, this musical interlude. I mean, and always, you know, when you have, I mean, that's what musicals are. There are, you know, a string of these put together. It's heightened. I mean, anytime you have a musical number in a film, it really heightens whatever that experience or moment is, right? It's kind of like that I have to burst out into song and dance. And it's almost in a way that these two are kind of, I mean, they're not dancing in a traditional sense, but there is a dance going on to the music with the bicycle.
Yeah.
And there's very much like a physicality to it. In the same way that there would be a physicality to a dance number. So it almost it really is just like a
you could see them musical. Like running into the ending of Hair or something, and
totally
naked people coming out of the forest.
Exactly. And it's shot very differently, like you described. There's a warmth to that and a romanticism to the shooting that's just not in any of the rest of the film. I mean, and even, you know, there's the playfulness of, like, you know, going through like the wood slat walls. There's like such a playfulness with the cinematography and how it's shot.
In the bull, that's the shot of the bull looking at him. That is also a shot that is directly in the Western that I made. We got a cow, and there's a moment where the character faces down a cow as a joke, like a little nod.
You're going to have to, we'll have to post a link. If your film is somewhere where people can see it, we'll have to post a link so that people can check that out. I don't think I've seen it, and I would like to see it. Or if maybe I've seen it, it's a long time ago. But
it's just funny that there's so much in the movie. I always forget how much I necessarily stole from it, because even that cow bit was accidental. We had a cow, and I was
it becomes part of your psyche, and then you know it comes out through your pores, you know, later.
Yes, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about story. Let's talk a little bit
actually, one more thing I actually wanted to mention about the music as well.
Okay.
I just wanted to jump in and say just to talk about the little the juxtaposition in the South American bit that you've got again.
Okay.
There's a little bit of it. There's an interesting bit because it's this montage of them robbing the South American banks in Bolivia.
Right.
And again, it's like with this like poppy, you know, almost a cappella sounding. Well, there's again not typically a cappella because there's instruments.
There are instrumentation, but I get the vocalizations. Kind of music, it's instead of lyrics, there's like vocalizations as instruments.
Of them robbing these banks. So I always just think, again, it's funny that there's this lighthearted juxtaposition in the music of them robbing all these banks.
Right.
Let's talk about the story.
Let's talk about the story a little bit. I mean, not that we're going to dive into plot, but just some important points here, I think, that kind of stand out from a story perspective. I mean, you've got anti-heroes here that I think this also kind of ties it into the timing of this film. So you've got, you know, our two main heroes are super charismatic, handsome guys. They also happen to be criminals, you know, and as we move through the film, they end up killing people, and but you definitely like them. You definitely are rooting for them. You want them to win. So I think it's interesting, you know, you've got a couple anti-heroes here. I think that was something that was really starting to come into popularity at this time.
And their playful
American
banter
cinema.
Between each other, yeah.
And and that's huge. I mean, we can talk a little bit too about cultural impact and how the film's aged, but you've got this kind of, it's a buddy film almost, if you will, in a sense. And I think that this film likely had an impact on and inspired a lot of other films where a big part of the story is this banter back and forth, the relationship between these co-leads. And that could be, you know, from anything from, you know, 48 Hours or Lethal Weapon or any of the countless films.
And again, a very big departure from, I think, to me, any other Western. I can't think of another one that would have a similar dynamic of the two main characters, because usually they were either bigger ensemble pieces or they were kind of like the one you know, solo man who is silent, kind of moves in and out, very, you know,
the
man with no name thing. So I think that it's interesting that, again, it's very much a departure from that typical way of doing Westerns, and instead you get these kind of lighthearted, nice, again, that's what's funny, is that even though they're like robbing these trains and stuff like that, you're on their side the whole time because they're so charming. And I think there's even a joke made about, so David Lowery made The Old Man and the Gun, in 2018, which I was actually at the premiere of and got to shake Robert Redford's hand, which was really cool.
Did it just turn into dust in your hand? I mean, he's what, 118?
Yeah, I've kept it in a jar actually, but that was his last like big movie, the one that he said he was retiring for, and very much the whole marketing scheme of that movie and the, I guess for lack of a better term, the aesthetic of that movie was very much synced towards Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the same font, like similar music choices. Yeah. And there's a moment in that movie though where he robs a bank, and it's a true story as well, and it even opens with the same title card. Most of what follows is true. And but the lady in the bank, when she's giving her statement to police, just sort of says like, well, he was also kind of a gentleman, like he was very polite. And so I think that's like, again, that kind of idea really to me stems from this movie, of that like you don't have to have mean people doing these things. And there's of course moments later on in the film where it gets very real and gets very grim, and when Butch is forced to kill someone for the first time, right, and you get this slow motion scream of the bandits that they've just killed falling backwards into the dust, and their guns flying away, and then just this silent shot of Butch and Sundance looking at the bodies, and
well, and then we have this total departure of Catherine Ross, who's this this grounding kind of element to their relationship. She is out of the picture, which I do find a little bit strange. I mean, a little bit from a story perspective, it seems kind of odd that she is just absent from the film kind of abruptly. Is a little bit strange to me. But, I just want to go back, look, I'm a huge fan when it comes to story. This is a simple story told well. It's an extremely simple story. And I think you and I were kind of discussing how it's so dissimilar to a lot of Westerns, especially, the Man with No Name trilogy, where you have these betrayals and these complex relationships and kind of plot twists and turns and, much more elaborate plots. I mean, it's hard to get any more simple than this plot. Yeah. And frankly, I mean, the latter half of the film is not much more than a chase in a sense. We've got, but the whole film it's extremely simple. And I'm curious, like, I think you probably are a fan of the film's pacing. I think that was something that critics at the time some critics were a little bit divided on. Yeah. And it was something that I felt a little bit. I felt pacing was the montage that we have in the middle of the film. They're interesting choices. And like I've already said, I respect that. But I did feel like there were some, it's a very simple plot. I feel like they could have even charged forward, more strongly. Yeah. With like with a little more oomph behind that. But I also see your point too, that this is kind of almost like a fairy tale, or kind of like this mythology. And
that's kind of the way I look at it. Yeah. Is exactly that. Like it's a tale that you would have heard in a saloon. Like it's this. Yeah. And I think, I do think it's again, the simplicity of the story to me is the best part of it. And I think because I think every filmmaker would strive to get a script like this, not necessarily in like the sense of dialogue, even though the dialogue is very good, but just in terms of the fact that it's a really rich story, but still very simple. There's not a lot of moving pieces. It's about two outlaws that are on the run.
Certainly stands in contrast to most things today. I feel like, especially with this quote unquote so-called second golden era of television. And limited series, I think that I feel like we've seen plot machinations become...
Everything's about plot.
Everything is so much about plot. And I think films often try to keep up with that, even though they've only got 90 or 120 minutes. I feel like many films feel an obligation to keep up with the just full-on quantity of plot that our stories now seem to have. I mean, it's just,
that's always my advice for if any filmmakers are out there listening to this, is like, whenever I'm trying to, tighten up a script, I just start cutting things. Like the feature that I was doing right now, the last draft, which became the shooting script, I cut an entire character out of it, and it solved so many problems when it came to why are things happening? How does this happen? Where does this go? What am I supposed to do with this character while they're, and I just cut them out and put kind of their functions onto
and everything
character.
I feel like has to have, an A, a B, a C, a D story. I mean, or I guess for, another way to say it would be subplots. So
yes,
everything feels like it has to have so many of these threads, and
like you've got to cut away to the B.
You've always and yes, and that can get kind of wild. So I do really appreciate that about this film, and I think that that's where films, I think, really shine. I mean, that they don't have to be the same as, not to get again, like, keep getting off on these tangents, but there's a place for all of them. There's a place for these really complicated stories to be told.
The Godfather or something, yeah.
But there's a place for very simple, and I feel like it's really where film shines when you've only got, again, 90, 120 minutes. It's a simple story told well. And it's about kind of world creation, which we haven't talked a ton about, or not directly, but indirectly. But I mean, this film does do a fantastic job of very quickly and efficiently setting up the world. And that's everything from, like you had mentioned in the opening titles, we have the silent film footage, the fake silent film. We have the sepia openings and closings. We've got, even in the montages, which I do feel like kind of take a little bit of the pacing away from the film, we have this world building that we really get a sense of the era that we're in this film, and it's very successful at doing that. Yeah. But yeah, so well, I mean, to kind of wrap up, I mean, I got a couple questions for you. I'm going to consider you the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid expert. Certainly between the two of us, you are. I'm curious, kind of. I mean, how do you feel like the film has aged? Now, obviously, I know that from a personal perspective, you still very much love the film. So that's not a question. Like,
so I've got to divide my personal bias.
So you've got to take try as best you can. I know it's impossible to completely do so, but as best you can, how do you feel like the film has aged as far as story goes and kind of technical presentation?
I think so. Okay, so for me, I think that it's very much a product of its time,
right?
But in a good way. I don't think it's something that, I don't think I've ever shown this movie to somebody and they've said, oh, that's very, late 60s, early 70s, but I don't like it. Like, I think usually it's more along the lines of, like, that's a really, again, for example, the raindrop scene, or just the use of montage and the music in it. And, every time I've kind of heard comment about that, it's more so being in a positive sense than a negative sense.
Right. It's like, I can tell the era that it was made in, but that's okay. It doesn't
very
distract.
Much, similar to something like a, Jaws, which is, I think, to me, there's a lot of things in Jaws that are very, very 1975, but those are all things that I like about the movie. And I think that everyone sort of likes about them. And that I think almost it's interesting that you mentioned world building, that I find that the 60s elements to this movie and the sort of more dated elements of it are almost a part of the world building too, that it's almost like it almost contextualizes the movie and why choices were made, which I think is really interesting. Like, there's nothing in this movie that I could really think of that I would say has necessarily aged poorly, that has kind of gone, and you may disagree, you might actually have moments, like even down to, and I was actually going to mention this in the cinematography section, I forgot, but the day for night in this movie I think is incredible. That all of the outdoor night scenes when they're being chased is all daytime.
It is, yes, it's day for night.
It looks really, really good.
It looks really good. I actually,
even on the shitty transfers.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Well, and it's my understanding that on the Blu-rays they actually, it's not timed correctly, and it looks even better if it were appropriately timed. But it's actually that it's over. It's this way too much.
The blacks are too high, I think.
The black levels, thank you, are way too high. So I actually am really impressed. You're right. It's like
for a lot of movies after this have tried to do day for night and not done it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, if I imagine, somebody just watching this, I think, the zooms might date it in a way a little bit, but not because people, I mean, I don't think people used zooms like this even back then, but because it's so rarely, if ever, that a filmmaker uses a zoom lens today, that's probably something that somebody might say, hey, that dates it. Looks a little strange. I'm not used to this grammar, because people are just not used to zooms being used in this way anymore. So that might date it a little bit. But again, I'm actually kind of a fan of the zoom. So for me, this isn't a problem. I enjoy seeing it. But I imagine somebody else watching it, that might stick out to them.
Yes. Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are, again, I just sort of said earlier, that there's a lot of people that are very, very anti-zoom, which I think is really funny, because both for ease of use and I think for
it's just another tool. It's like it's a tool in the toolbox. So okay, and I think I would agree with you overall. I think that although you can certainly tell the era that this film was made, I think that it's certainly a part of its charm now, and doesn't make the film kind of unviewable or doesn't lose its charm. And I mean, look, it's, Paul Newman and Robert Redford as the leads, or you'd be hard pressed to find two more charismatic
really
actors.
Go wrong there, yeah.
Right. Even amongst actors who are currently living, I can hardly think of somebody who would have done, been more charismatic in those roles. So yeah, I mean, I think, any last words on kind of cultural impact? Or
one thing is, like, I think, again, to think of the elements of just the whole movie as a whole is what I always kind of like to do with movies like this, is think about, okay, if it was remade today, what would it be like? And I think that it would lose so much of its charm. I think it would lose so much of its, it wears its choices on its sleeves, but I think that really helps it. And I think that, I think, again, just the elements that are really a product of its time are things that heighten the movie for me. So I think that you would lose so much character if you pulled a lot of that stuff out, and that that would become less special. It would become less kind of like unique.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I think you mentioned a handful of things we did kind of throughout about its impact. I think certainly in with buddy films, there's been this film has had a large impact. I think
and even to video games, again, that I think
even
it's so
into
shocking
video games,
to me that the move, or a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, which came out, I think, 2018, has references to this in the game, but also that the fact that the creators, Rockstar, told their employees, watch this film, because this is one of the key, because that, of course, is, again, about the kind of downfall of the Wild West. So
excellent. Well, it's like especially I feel like, and this is probably one of the best examples of this, watching this film or kind of discussing it through your eyes, being such a fan, has once again heightened my appreciation of it, which is awesome. It's really one of the fringe benefits of doing these podcasts. I hope that you feel the same way after having discussed one of the films that I have maybe an initial greater connection or relationship with than you, and hopefully the listener, I hope out there, that maybe we're contributing to your furthered increased enjoyment of these movies as well. That would be an awesome thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So on that note, we'll look forward to next time. We'll have to see what film we're going to do. Ooh, how exciting. But until then, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.